Well, with yesterday being Memorial Day, I thought it was only appropriate to our men and women in uniform, past, present, and future. God bless you, and thank you for all you do for us. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Thurston. Okay, in the event of a fire or an emergency, our emergency exits are located to the rear of the chamber and down the stairs to my left. Please proceed out to the parking lots. Kathy, could I have roll call, please?
Mrs. Thurston?
Here.
Mr. Janitis? Here. Mr. Peabody?
Present.
Mrs. Ungary?
Here.
Mr. Warwer?
Here.
Mr. Grady?
Here.
Mrs. LeBlanc?
Here.
Mr. Neville?
Here.
Chairman Serard?
Here. Board guests. We have none.
We have no guests tonight.
Very good. Superintendent's report, Dr. Schuman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have one of our representatives here this evening, so you can start at Enfield High, and there's no one here from Fermi this night.
Shelby, you have the floor.
I don't have much to say. Thursday was our prom, and it was a really, really fun time. And our awards night is this Thursday at 6:30 at our school, and that's about it from me.
Thanks, Shelby. Dr. Schuman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I do apologize to the board for running right up to the time limit. I had the good fortune of being over and celebrating the end of the year with the Buzz Robotics Group. They are having their end of the year celebration, and the chairman, or not the chairman, but one of the high-ranking officials from UTOS was there. And so they wanted me to meet him and have a chance to talk with him a little before the meeting. So they started at 6:30, and I left and came across town as soon as I could. There are some things in your packet. Again, the things are mostly related to opportunities we have. We have the academic awards night and scholarship breakfasts and evenings taking place. And then a lot of different events as we close the end of the school year in May and June that you're certainly welcome to attend, and I know the folks would be anxious to see as many board members there as they can. And that's really all I have for you tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Schuman. Audiences? Moving along. Board member comments. Ms. Thurston.
The only thing, tomorrow Head Start at 10:30 will be having a celebration for their 50th anniversary. So I'll be there celebrating with them, and being the board rep for the past couple years with those guys, the program's just phenomenal. The kids are awesome. And I've got so many little thank you notes all over my refrigerator. Looks like I have little kids of my own. So I will be there celebrating with them. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Thurston. Mr. Janitis. You.
Well, I do it. Man, you and technology just don't agree.
You see me using my iPad tonight? First, I'd like to say I hope that there's a good closing for the end of the school year. The toughest month to teach is usually June. And I hope all goes well for both the kids, the teachers, and all other staff, especially the cafeteria workers. Also, when I was preparing my comments for tonight's meeting, I got thinking about the three boards that I have been able to serve on. And that got me thinking to some boards of the past, some going way back, and some individuals popped up, and I just want to throw out their names just to go down memory road for a second. But Pat Stroine, I thoroughly enjoyed him. Roxy Burke, character of characters, but boy was he good. I enjoyed Nick Cinsigali a lot. I thought he did a lot to get things done for the betterment of education here in town. And behind the scenes, Chuck Johnson did an awful lot too. So I just wanted to give a shout out to those 4 individuals. Okay, first I'd like to start my comments off on a positive note. I'd like to compliment Scott Copen and the town council for the way in which they hold organized and well-run meetings. The parties, for the most part, usually come out in a united front, and it is obvious that both sides hold caucuses. I feel that Scott has been one of the best overall mayors that Enfield has ever had. I have voted for him in the past, and I will continue to vote for him in the future if he chooses to run again. However, this is not to say that I agree on everything that he wants to do as mayor. With that said, I've tried not to get involved with the town council and the MOU issue. I know there have been some behind-the-scenes conversations between some town council members and some Board of Ed members, that there have been some public and private sniping going on, and that there has been some politicking being played. But now I'm going to speak up. At the last town council meeting, some councilors seem to have had the need to take some carefully couched shots at the Board of Ed in regards to the decision not to renew the security guards. How disappointed they were in our decision. How saddened they were to have excess monies. What troubles me the most that these were the type of comments that came from members of my former party affiliation, the Republicans. But let me be blunt. I am not sorry that the backdoor tactics that some attempted to use didn't work out as intended. You thought you had your 5 votes on the Board of Ed, but you didn't. I personally would like to know when exactly those MOUs that the town council entered into with the non-public schools were actually signed. 2 years ago, the committee agreed to have security guards in all the schools in Enfield, public and private, for they were all kids of Enfield. Now the plot thickens and the picture gets fuzzier and fuzzier by the moment. Now allow me to respectfully express a disappointment I have in some on the town council. You say you entered into the MOU with the non-public schools before we on the Board of Education even took our vote. Our vote saved a lot of money for the taxpayers of Enfield, and those monies could have gone a long way in helping us on the Board of Ed to solve the problem of where we are going to have to make cuts to our school system, thanks to the 4.1% cuts you gave us. Now, I too am saddened, but because we do not have excess monies. A further disappointment I have is that you took those savings and decided to spend it on other items instead of simply taking those monies out of the budget and helping keep down the mill rate increase. Again, we have to cut 4.1% from our budget, and yet the majority of the town council decided to spend a good chunk of the savings we gave you on 2 items that have nothing to do with the Enfield Public Schools. You're going to be spending money on the Hazardville Institute, knowing, or you should know, the catastrophic cuts this board are going to have to make. A couple of meetings ago, I thought that Mr. Grady had crossed the line when he called out the town manager and asked, "What planet are you from?" Well, I'm going to one-up Vinny and say something to some of the town council members. Are you nuts? This isn't a game. This is for real. The budget process involves the basic education of all the kids in Enfield. We had a special meeting last week to discuss some of the areas where we will probably have to go to make our budget balance. I'll tell you this, the discussion we had made my stomach turn. I addressed the parents at home and members of the town council. We are faced with the possibility of, A, having very large increases in class sizes. B, programs at all levels that will have to be cut, especially at the secondary schools. C, maybe athletics will have to be cut for 1 year. Maybe music. D, maybe the kindergarten program will have to go back to half days. The preschool program slated for the former H.B. Stowe may not get started. E, teachers and other staff layoffs could be unprecedented this time. Yet our town council is going to spend money on the Hazardville Institute and fund armed guards for 3 non-public schools, while we dismantle and watch the Enfield public school system disintegrate before our very eyes. I am still a proponent of using Fermi as a middle school and using the President JFK building as a lower intermediate school, housing the 5th, 4th, and 3rd grades, thereby allowing us to close up to 3 buildings and possibly saving some monies on busing costs. However, at our special meeting, it was clearly expressed to me that this would mean that we would have to pay off the state monies we borrowed when all the additions were put on. We owe approximately $800,000 on the Stowe building and $1 million plus on all the other buildings except for Fermi, which we owe nothing. Now, I got to thinking, if we close these buildings as schools, then those buildings would no longer be the responsibility of the Board of Education. Those buildings would now become the responsibility of the town council, and then they would be responsible for paying off about $3.5 million. I wonder if that would make the town council members feel like the position that they've put us in. Would they still be appropriating monies for the Hazardville Institute in the non-public schools? I think we all know what the answer to that question would be. The mess we find ourselves in is not the responsibility of just the town council, though. I place a majority of the financial problems on the previous board and with a good deal of blame to go around on this present board. In my opinion, we have A, recklessly negotiated some contracts. B, central office staff and salaries increased by approximately $400,000. C, we spent tons of monies on computers. D, many new and good programs have been added by the administration. E, we added all-day kindergarten. These things cost money, and money is obviously no longer forthcoming. The money needed to maintain these things are just not available. This town simply cannot afford it anymore. We couldn't afford it to begin with. 4 years ago, the majority of the Board of Education changed hands, changed parties. It will always be my belief that we, and I'm speaking as when I was a Republican then, that we lost control of the Board of Education because we had to make some incredibly difficult decisions that were not well understood by the voting public. A, we consolidated elementary schools for the sake of balancing class sizes and to save some monies. B, we voted to consolidate the high schools for many reasons, one of which was to save some monies. C, we cut the sports program at JFK, again, for many reasons, but one of which was to save monies. D, we put to bed the high school graduation where the high school graduations would be held for many reasons, one of which was to save some monies. And E, we totally botched the busing issue, and I don't think we saved any money on that one. I hope someone is seeing a pattern here. To add programs is easy. To pay for them becomes difficult and costly. To cut them becomes very unpopular and contentious. We have ourselves to blame for a good deal of the dilemma we find ourselves in. You want a simple solution to our predicament? Do it the way teachers are cut. Even though we lose a lot of excellent staff this way, last one in, first one out. Everything that has been added to the school system over the course of the last 3 years, last in, first out. Call this crazy, because it is crazy. This board and the superintendent's office have known for months what the ballpark cuts were going to be. Nobody seemed to accept the fact that these cuts would become a political reality. At no time, in my opinion, has the Board of Education and the superintendent's office been properly prepared for what we face today. I asked months ago to prioritize things that might have to be cut, to have something to show the town council and the public what X% less would mean. I asked that we do this in increments of 0.5% all the way down to 2%. Now we are in panic mode, and nothing good usually comes out of working under those panic conditions. And finally, 6 years ago when I first got elected to the Board of Ed, the Republican board members and the town council board members would hold some joint caucuses together to iron out what differences we might have had to come to a consensus and move ahead as a united party. The Republicans on the present board don't even caucus. Heck, and I have to say this with a heavy heart, but you've seen an empty chair at most of our meetings. That's because that board member works in Washington, D.C. and lives in Annapolis, Maryland, but still owns property in Enfield. I just wish that that seat was occupied more often, for that seat belongs to one of the more calmer and level-headed members on this board. If we, the Board of Education and the Town Council, can't work together again, this problem with the school budget and future budgets will only have disaster written all over them, and the blame will equally rest in the hands of both the Board of Ed and the Town Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Janitis. Mr. Peabody.
Well spoken, Peter. Appreciate your comments, but I do have to take exception with the fact that we did produce a document that showed what the cuts were going to be at a 1% level. And that was done in March, I believe, and we had it up on the website. We gave it to the town council and to pretty much everybody. Not great comments. I take them to heart, and I appreciate your efforts over the years to keep us on the right track and share your experience. In terms of the budget, last week we had a meeting. It was a public meeting. And I'm going to say what I said in the meeting. We had $2.7 million gap. We looked at staff reductions that would have brought it down to, that would have reduced that by $1.7 million, making a $1 million gap. We then went and looked at other activities, which would bring it down to a $134,000 gap. We looked at central office, and we brought it down to $34,000 gap, which people feel are reasonable to manage over the course of a full school year. That was the worst case scenario. We challenged Dr. Schumann to come up with a better case scenario, and we're hoping to get that tonight. I believe we're anticipating getting that tonight, a better case scenario. So we looked at, like Peter said, there weren't a lot of happy people on the board last Monday night because of the situation that we're in. There's no blame here. There's a lot of blame, not blame, but there's a lot of culpability to go around. We need to be much more diligent in our budget process. We need to be somewhat more transparent in our budget process. We need to have an understanding earlier. However, we don't get the number that we use for revenue from the town until May. So it kind of is what it is almost, but we can do a better job of telling people the value add that the school system brings. What do we do well? Where do we need to improve? Show those out. And reasonable people will say, okay, we understand where you have to apply revenues, where you have to apply your monies to take care of issues, where you don't have to apply monies to take care of your issues as well. So that's the dilemma we're in right now. And again, like I said at the beginning of the process, and I said last week, we have to make informed decisions. Informed is the key word. And people need to understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how well we're doing it, and again, where we need to improve. I think this board has done a decent job of trying to figure that out. There's still some cloudiness and kludginess and a little more translucent than transparent in the budget, but we've got a long way to go, but we're taking turns in the right direction. It takes a while to change course and change culture. That's really all I'm going to say on the matter right now, and we'll see what happens as we transpire through the night. But I do want to thank the individuals on the board for their inputs and the discussions we've had. They've been passionate, to say the least, but they've been respectful and purposeful. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Peabody. Ms. Ungary.
Okay. I said a lot last week and said about all I needed to say. I forgot to mention that I attended a concert that they had at Eli Whitney, and it was really, really enjoyable. The choir sang, and they were great. I also attended the Craig Council meeting in Hartford last week, and we elected a president, and everything's going smooth there. I wanted to wish everyone a happy Memorial Day, and I hope everyone enjoyed their long weekend. And I wanted to thank all our veterans that have served to give us our freedom. That's about it. I also wanted to say that I appreciated Peter and Ray's comments tonight, and I appreciate all the hard work that this board puts in. This is a tough job, and I've learned something from every single one of you and people at Central Office, and I think we've got a good group of people here that love our community and work really hard, and I just wanted to thank you all for your hard work.
Thank you, Ms. Ungar. Vice Chairman Walmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, I want to send out a greeting to the educators and administrators at Barnard Elementary. I was there today, and they continue to do a great job. Nancy Hayes, her staff, Rhonda, her administrative assistant, all the staff there keep the programs running smoothly. The head teacher does a superb job, continues to come up with innovative ways to educate our children. I also want to mention the Memorial Day Parade. It was a great turnout, great weather, and it was a rather nice march down up Enfield Street to Town Hall. Looking forward to attending both the high school graduations coming up in a month. I saw my niece's, Quinn Cosa's prom dress from the prom. She had a great time. I'm sure you did too. I heard it was a great event. Looking forward to the upcoming graduation in another month. And I'd like to thank, first of all, Mr. Vin Grady for all the yeoman's work he's done with me on the policy committee. We've, starting last fall, we went through and reviewed a number of policies, and we're able to bring those forth to the board. And I want to thank Mr. Neville for his stewardship the last meeting to get those policies enacted. Appreciate your support. And I also want to finally mention thanks to Deputy Superintendent Chris Strezak for conducting all the research necessary since last fall to bring our board policies up to date. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Walmer. Secretary Grady.
Well, first I'd like to echo what Mrs. Thurston was saying earlier today about our veterans and, past, the ones that gave the ultimate sacrifice, those who are presently in the armed forces, but not just on one day, but for every day. We celebrate Memorial Day, we celebrate Veterans Day. There's 2 days out of the year that we make a big deal out of it. I think we should be making a big deal out of it every single day. And I think if you see a veteran in wearing a hat from the Vietnam era, World War II, or whatever, Korean conflict, I think you should say thank you to them. And even the present day, people in their uniforms and doing their everyday jobs for us, trying to keep us safe. The only thing I'm going to say really about the budget is, Mr. Peabody, I agree with you, but I disagree with you a little bit on transparency. I think we presented a budget that was transparent, where we asked for something just to carry on till next year. And unfortunately, as my comments were like last time, I asked the town council to listen, and they chose not to. Unfortunately, we're saddled with a $2.7 million deficit that we have to make up. There are going to be some cuts that some people might not like, but nothing we can do about that. I just wish they would had opened their eyes and ears just a little bit more before they made their final votes on that budget, though. That's about it.
Thank you, Secretary Grady. Ms. Blank.
I had the pleasure of accompanying the fifth graders from Eli Whitney to Sturbridge Village for their fifth grade field trip. It was a beautiful weather day, and I had a lot of fun. And the last time I went, I think I was in sixth grade for my field trip. Yeah, and the teacher said, "Do you remember much?" And I said, "I remember the blacksmith. That was the one that you always wanted to get to first." Yeah. As far as the budget goes, I agree with a lot of what Peter had to say to a point, and then there's some pieces that I do disagree with. I definitely agree with the first half with appropriating the funds for other uses with the guards. With that being said, there were 4 members on the council that did try to amend and vote for the education budget to get more money from the guard program. And there was a motion made by Red Edgar, and it was seconded by Gina Sakala. And Red Gina, Tom Arnone, and Ed Denny voted to try to get more of that guard money, about $500,000, to the education system. When I hear $500,000, I hear that's saving a lot of teachers. But that vote failed 7-4. And I'm telling you who voted for it, and you guys can figure out who didn't. They know who they are. After all that's said and done, we're going to have a $2.7 million deficit in our budget, but your taxes are going up. Your taxes are going to pay for the guards in the parochial schools. Your taxes are going to pay for 2 additional police officers. Not as many members of the town are losing their job as much as Enfield Public School teachers will lose their jobs. There were political games with party nominations, and if you were going to vote a certain way on the guards, I won't vote a party line, because if you're going to threaten me with a party nomination, I'm not the right person for your party. So with that being said, budget season is contentious, and it shouldn't be. Budget season keeps you awake at night, and it shouldn't. Budget season keeps you away from your family. And that's part of our job, and that's what we get elected for and know going into it. But why is it always a fight? Why is it always an uphill battle? We want what's best for our school. A lot of what we pay out in a budget isn't, we don't want $2.6 million so we can add more teachers and more administrators. We just want it to stay status quo because we have to meet state mandates and contractual obligations. Whatever's left over, and there's not much left over, we can reinvest back into the school system. I'm saddened that the class sizes are going to be going up with in the event of teacher layoffs. Peter says prior boards, the reason why they did the reorg was to balance out class sizes. It's frustrating because we can't, the newspaper said last week, well, board member Tina LeBlanc said to cut full day kindergarten. They took a snippet of what I said. When you're taking $2.6 million, you can't just focus that on the high school. You can't just focus that on the middle school. You can't just focus it on kindergarten, preschool. I mean, those cuts are going to be focused through the whole district. I don't know why. Sometimes we don't seem to value education. When people move out, people say, well, people are leaving Enfield because their taxes are high. Then why are they moving to Suffield? Why are they moving to Ellington? Why are they moving to Summers? Their taxes are higher. Why are they moving to South Windsor? Their taxes are higher because they don't have to battle every year for a school budget. It's not just the state's fault. So with that being said, I'm going to do my best to vote what I think is right, which affects the least amount of kids, even though everyone's going to be affected this time. I appreciate any support. I've had a lot of people reach out to me, asking questions, talking about the guards. And I will do my best to finish off my term and this budget season the best I can for the students in Enfield. I have a personal stake, and it's heartbreaking.
Thank you, Ms. LeBlanc. Mr. Neville.
Just a few comments about the budget. Most of what I wanted to say, I said at last week's meeting, which Peter correctly said was devastating to sit down and look at dismantling a lot of the things that we together have done over the last several years. And they're good things, okay? And we can debate some of the other stuff, but I think we felt they were good things and they benefited the kids. But when you put everything on the table and you're trying to find $2.7 million, it's very, very difficult. And I don't want to be here with sour grapes and just complaining about it because I don't think that does any good. What did bother me most, and having sat in on at least one of the budget night sessions there, was the discussion about the cuts. And we've laid out a pretty thorough document about the level of the cuts. It was very, very serious, and what the impact of the cuts were. And we really pushed Dr. Schumann to give that 13-page document that we put out there, and I think it was pretty thorough and pretty much self-explanatory. Not one time during that discussion did I hear anybody talk about the impact of $2.7 million in cuts. I mean, we can agree or disagree whether they should be there or not, but nobody talked about what the impact on our students and on our community was going to be, and that was disheartening. Not one single comment about the impact. We talked a lot about keeping the mill rate down below 1 mil. In fact, that was the largest conversation that I heard, and I certainly didn't hear all of the conversation, but I kept thinking somebody's going to step up here and say, how can we cut $2.7 million and not talk about what it's going to do to the system? It can't be a positive. There's going to be some negative impacts, and maybe they need to be. Maybe some need to be done. I don't know. I don't agree with the philosophy that went there, but at the very least, it should have been put on the table to talk about what that impact was going to be, because it affects all of us. So that was disheartening. But right now, I'm going to put that aside. You correctly said, Tina, that we have a job to do tonight, and I'm going to try to do the best I can to try to minimize the impact on that. We're hopeful that Dr. Schumann has wrestled with all of the complexity of our budget and come up with some things that will help us minimize the hurt to the kids and to the community. It's not just the kids. It's to the community, because the school system is the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neville. Stacy already went. It's my turn. It's my turn. Memorial Day. For my brothers and sisters who have worn the uniform of this country, I pray that God blesses you every day. When I was a kid and growing up, every Memorial Day you'd hear the Gettysburg Address. And there's a line in the Gettysburg Address that very effectively, at least for me, reflects what Memorial Day is really about. As Abraham Lincoln is talking about dedicating this piece of ground at the Battle of Gettysburg for a cemetery, he says, in a larger sense, we cannot consecrate, we cannot dedicate, and we cannot hallow this ground because the men who struggled here, living and dead, have consecrated it far beyond our means to add or detract. And that always stuck with me as a kid, and it sticks with me to this day, because you can never say thank you enough to those that wore the uniforms so that this country, as conceived, may live. And I want my brothers and sisters to remember that I pray for them every day. So, congratulations to Buzz Robotics again. I think it's a wonderful program that represents us very well nationally now. So, and you guys are just awesome. Some of the other comments that were made. One of the things I've always said is I dislike the budget process probably the most because it's backwards. The Fed should come out with their budget, the state comes out with their budget, the town comes out with our budget, and then we come out with ours and everybody's happy. Because it allows the real numbers to be reflected. And I think that's a good word. It's the real numbers. I don't vote a person for voting their. I don't blame a person for voting their conscience. And I know that one of the things that happened when I sat on the board was I took an oath to uphold the laws of the state of Connecticut, and also to try to do what's best for our kids. But the law comes first. And that's what we do. 99% of what the board does is the law. So we don't have the power of nullification, not without the power of the voter in the town to help us nullify. But that's not how we work, not as a society anyway. We're always looking for workarounds, and that's not how it's supposed to work. You follow the law. You take the oath to follow the law, and if you don't follow the law, you're violating your oath. You probably don't belong on the board, or any other office for that matter. The goal is to change the law. That's how it works. And the law, we pass policy, but we don't pass laws. The guys upstairs do that. I had an interesting conversation with a citizen who was asking me, is it really true that the state doesn't fund us to the level that we're supposed to. And I gave a very good example, special education reimbursement. The law says that we spend 4.5 times on every student for special ed, and the state is obligated by law to cover 100% of the cost after that 4.5 times. But the state has put a cap on that to 70%. So we don't get 30% of the money that we're supposed to get by law, because they passed another law to make it not really a law. Add it up, 30% of what we're supposed to get from the state in reimbursement, that's in the law, and they don't do it. Especially in special ed, which is one of our most expensive programs. And then ask yourself, really, where is the numbers coming short from? That's just one example, and it's a big one. Somebody had asked a question earlier, and we also got the information out. Since 2006, our demographics in a student population have shrunk by 1,535 students. Since 2006, we have not replaced 105 employees. So, as our demographics have been going down, our staff has been reduced. Contrary to some other comments that have been made in the past. When I first sat on the board, the largest cut we made was 60 teachers. Gone. And administrators and some other people. Gone. When we reorganized. That was a big cut. Now we've added a few, but we're still less than what we were in 2006. And a significant number less. So, was there a lot of attrition? Yeah. Is that why it wasn't as bloody as some probably would have liked to have seen it? Yes, because we allowed people to retire and just didn't replace them. But every time that we do that, it still leaves a vacant hole in the school system, because we're not hiring somebody to fill it. There were lots of reasons that we did the reorganization. To save money, yes, but we were also mandated to by law because of Title I. Title I says we need to have an equal opportunity to education for every student. That's why we balanced our class sizes. But more importantly, the state doesn't recognize a neighborhood school and the composition of the neighborhood for that school. They count heads. They said there's a certain amount of Hispanic kids here, and there's a certain amount of African American kids here, and there's a certain amount of Indian kids here, and then they go, wait, you have too many kids who live in this neighborhood in this one school. And then they come after us, which is another reason, and a significant reason, why we reorganized the school, to be in compliance with state law. And that one often gets overlooked. So we all took an oath, and we've all done our best to work as a team, keeping the politics to a minimum. And I congratulate all of my board members because we've done that. I also congratulate every board member who's done the heavy-duty work in the committees, because that's where you learn this stuff, is in the committee work. So if you don't show up for the committees, you're always caught behind the 8 ball, not really knowing what's going on. And that's just is what it is. So, moving on.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move item 17 to just before item 10.
Second. Do you have a motion to move item 17A just before, so that would be the next.
Yes,
And seconded by
next
Mr. Waller. Any discussion? Sensing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Thurston? Mr. Janitis?
Yes.
Mr. Peabody?
Affirmative.
Mrs. Ungary?
Yes.
Mr. Walwer?
Yes.
Mr. Grady?
For?
Mrs. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mr. Neville?
Yes.
Chairman Sirard?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, under 17, we have the need to go into executive session, and since it's now been moved, do I have a motion to go into executive
So
session?
moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Neville, seconded by Mr. Peabody. Any discussion? Sensing none. Show of hands. Motion passes. We will be back. We're back in open session. Dr. Schuman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
For the record, this is item 10A, Town Council fiscal year 2015-2016 budget allocation discussion and action, if any. Dr. Schuman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the next several minutes, we will outline for the board a series of reductions that will allow you to reconcile your budget with the allocation that you receive from the town council. These final budgetary adjustments that you'll be asked to consider this evening are going to impact several of the bargaining units with which you have agreements. These bargaining units have not been contacted, so they will not be aware of the changes in the impact to them that you will be making tonight. As a precaution, we have scheduled meetings with them for the first thing in the morning, and we have scheduled meetings with various faculty around the district, which all can be canceled if the board chooses not to move forward this evening. But we want to give you the ability to enact these changes and then allow us to have time to meet your responsibilities in terms of the agreements you have. We do not want the board to be in a position where it could be construed that you're bargaining in bad faith. We want to make sure we protect you from that. As we all know, the education business is a people business, and the places where we have most of our investment is in our staff and the benefits and the things that they do for us. And therefore, in order to reconcile this budget, we'll have to make some changes in the level at which we have that. Before we get to those specifically, we spend some time scrubbing through all the areas of the budget that could be available to us, and we provided you with a document that you have in front of you that outlines these areas. The first thing, what is the insurance benefit premiums, the cost share that our employees contribute. We have, through the work of Mr. Dresick and our agents of record and our consultant, identified $197,000 in premiums that can be applied to reduce next year's budget, as we expect that that cost share, although the percentage you've negotiated does not go up, the amount that we are being charged by the agent of record and told to budget for will be, and that will also be borne partly by our employees. The educational cost sharing adjustment, which is the money we receive from the state when we spend more than 4.5 times the per pupil expenditure on a special education student, is funded at a certain rate. We all know, and the chair has articulated very well earlier tonight, that was supposed to be at 100%, and each year it is at a different rate. We had budgeted at 70%, and we have found out now it will actually be closer to 72%. So that does two things. It allows us to save money this year because we'll be getting a little more money back, and it allows us to reduce what we've projected for next year by about $140,000. Through the work of our personnel office, we have worked with Kelly Services. We hired them this year because of the requirements under the Affordable Care Act, where we were going to need to supply benefits, health benefits to our employees. If we hire a firm, which then hires our substitutes, those employees are the firm's employees, not the board's employees, therefore relieving the board from the cost of that health insurance. Now, that comes at a cost, obviously, because the company that hires those individuals will need to pay for those costs. However, there are some individuals who work for us who go out for longer terms of time. The daily subs or the I've got the flu, I'll be out for 3 or 4 days subs will continue to work with Kelly. But on those employees who will be out for a long period of time, either for surgical procedures or FMLA causes related to possibly maternity or things like that, those employees, we believe we can do better at managing ourselves. And we're going to take those employees back, and our personnel office will manage those employees, and we believe there's a savings there for us, about $78,000. In the terms of nutrition services, the board receives a reimbursement from the Nutritional Services Division each year to help alleviate the cost of workers' comp and the cost of benefits. And the board pays for the lunchroom aides that we have in all of our cafeterias. We are going to put a little bit of the weight of this reduction on the nutritional services folks and ask them to pay a little bit more of the cost for workers' comp and benefits and ask them to pick up the cost of the lunchroom aides. So there's a savings there for the board of $196,000. Each year we budget for $125,000 in Medicaid. We hire an employee who files all the Medicaid reimbursement forms. We then take the Medicaid reimbursement and we give that to the town side of government. Originally, in the original budget calculations, they budget back $125,000 to us. This year, through the hard work of that employee and our special education directors and that department, we've actually been able to collect $179,463 over the $125,000. And that money can be used to apply directly to our reduction for the cost for next year. After we've done all that, with the money that we've received in excess cost sharing that we didn't anticipate, plus balancing our other accounts, our business office is projecting conservatively $119,000, granted most of that coming from the extra percentage in excess cost sharing, that we will run as a surplus for this year, which we can return to the town at the end of this fiscal year, and town government said they would apply that to our side of the cost for the ITPC, the Information Technology Committee budget. So that gets us part of the way where we need to go. And then we needed to look at 2 other areas to get the final $1.7 million. And that's going to come out of our own personnel and the IT personnel and the funding of that, those expenses. Our Chief Education Technology Officer, Mr. Barassa, and the Director of Technology, Mr. Russell, and the Town Manager, and I have worked and looked at that budget. We found ways to reduce some things. We found cost sharing. Mr. Dresick has called many of our vendors and simply said to them, we're facing a huge budget shortfall. If you can't help us, we can't continue. And so we were able to save some reasonable savings there, but it wasn't enough. We had planned to finish buying iPads for the teachers so that all teachers would have an iPad to use in the classroom. We're not going to be able to do that. We have to cut all of that idea out, at least defer it for now. So I believe we have iPads all the way down to the 6th grade level. And so the K-5, again, we're not going to be able to do that. The one thing that the town council did do is they took the $175,000 to replace all the workstation laptops for our teachers, and they're going to allow us to get all those because they're going to do a lease. So they've taken the money away from us, our cost exposure, and they're going to be able to lease new machines for all those folks. Part of one of our other leases, we had purchased some desktop computers. They weren't quite as functional for the teachers, but they were cheap. They were able to get them in the room for those old Toshibas that were failing. We still have 300 of those in the district, which we can reappropriate to fill in at some of the levels where we're failing in our computers. And our elementary schools especially are trying to keep their labs running on old Toshiba machines that are breaking down, and quite frankly, the IT department simply does not have enough spare parts to keep those up and running. Now when they break down, they're just being discarded. We've had to cut the new computers for the media center, for some of the media centers, in the tech ed department. We've cut the funding for the computers for the language labs, and hopefully that we will have those all back in as part of the FF&E when we open the new building. So the new high school will have a language lab. We'd hope to get that started a little early. We're not going to be able to do that. So when you take out all those machines that we cut, and the machines for tech ed and the language lab, and also some software that we're not going to be able to purchase. We want to get involved with a credit recovery piece of software that allows students who fall behind to go online and do some work under the supervision of an Enfield teacher to get the credit recovery program going. We're not going to be able to afford that software. We're not going to be able to afford software upgrades in some of our areas right away. We're going to run the current version, and we'll see how far we get into the school year. And if the spring rolls around and we're able to do some of the upgrades, we think we'll do those. Again, those vendors said that they're going to support that software. We're not going to have unsupported software. We're just not going to have the latest software. We're going to need to do it, but we're going to be able to defer it for a while. And perhaps the harshest hit is in the area of employees. We're not going to be able to send our IT employees for as much professional development as we had hoped. That's an ever-changing field. Those guys and women need to be at the state of the art at all times. We're not going to be able to send them for as much training as we had hoped for. And in fact, we're going to have to lay 2 of them off. We won't get into the individuals at this point. This is a decision that the town manager and the director and myself will have to make, and we'll have to notify those employees. But we're going to lay them off. And by doing that, that means a significant reduction in services. These are the gentlemen who come out and fix our machines when they go down. They're the ones that when the network fails, they help get it back up. When email goes down, they get it running again. When a piece of software needs to be installed in a lab and brought up to speed, they're the ones that come and do that, on both our side and the town side. We have agreed that the impact will be significant. The director is working on that along with our Chief Education Technology Officer to see how we're going to handle it. More of that work is going to fall on the 2 individuals who we have working for us. We understand that. They're going to have to work a little bit more and pick up some of that, and we're all going to have to be a little more patient at certain times when we don't get the service that we need from the IT department. I know that they will, pull together and figure out how to supply that service for us, but we all know that when you take 2 of the bodies away, that's a lot of manpower that we won't have for us to work with. All of those changes in IT result in a reduction of $601,252. The last $1,157,524 will come out of the board operating expenses in terms of personnel. The place where we can save the most money in terms of personnel is when a veteran teacher making top salary retires and we don't have to replace that salary. For us to lay off our 22, 23, 24, and 25-year-olds saves us very, very little money. In fact, when you factor in our responsibility to pay them unemployment can cost us $26,000. Their salaries are only $40,000. We don't save a whole lot of money for everyone we do. So we sat down, Mr. Dresick, Mr. Kosha, our building principals, sat down. We said, let's look at where we have vacancies from retirement. And what we have to do is we have to be creative in our scheduling and get people into those positions. If it's an essential position, we've got to find somebody in the district that can do that work so we don't have to fill that position. They identified 14 of those positions. They're in all areas. They're in facts, in reading, in math, in guidance, in physical education, in health, in special education, in library media. Our principals did a real nice job of sharing individuals. There'll be more individuals moving from school to school, doing part of a job here and part of a job there. They were very collaborative as they went through it. They allowed us to save 14 positions, which we can eliminate. Again, these are, just like in IT, there won't be bodies there to do this work. The work will get spread out, and the work won't be done by as many hands. But it does allow us to achieve the budget reductions we're looking for. We're also going to step up our transition of going from 2 high schools to 1. We're going to consolidate and restructure 24 positions into 13 positions. And all that work will be done with Mr. Dresick and through the collective bargaining process, but we feel there'll be considerable savings there. We are also going to reallocate and reassign and ask for some changes in the current administrative staffing schedule the way we have it. We have a retirement as a principal, and we're going to look to move some people around so that we can fill that retirement with an interim assistant principal at the high school that we're going to be closing in a year, which will help us not only this year, but it'll help us next year. We are going to take our principal from JFK Middle School and reassign her to the intermediate level. I am presenting for you a candidate who I would like you to approve to become the principal of John F. Kennedy Middle School. And he is one of our long-standing administrators, a gentleman who's had opportunities pass him by and handled it very well, been nothing but professional all the way down the line, and we believe he is ready to assume a principalship, and that is the assistant principal, the current assistant principal, one of them at Enfield High School, Mr. Steven Sargalski. And I would like you to consider appointing him as the principal of JFK Middle School beginning effective July 1. Having done that, we can shift various other assistant principals into roles that we feel will strengthen the district and eventually lead to a vacancy at Fermi High School, where we'll fill it with an interim person from inside. We're going to give one of our inside folks who've been studying administration, who wants a shot, an opportunity to sit in the role for a year. They come in at the first level, we save money, they get a nice opportunity to learn, and they also then would be have an opportunity to do one of two things. That we could be creating an individual with talents and skills who could leave the district. That would be unfortunate, but we could. But we feel we owe that to them. Or they could return to us as a teacher, or they could apply for a position in the event that we have additional retirements or resignations from next year. So when we do all those things, we eliminate the positions, we restructure from 24 to 13, we reassign and appoint new administrators in different roles, we can save the final $1,157,524 we're looking for. So we piece all of that together. That allows you to fill the $2,668,505 gap that you have between what you asked for and what you were appropriated. And I certainly can elaborate on some things if you wish. However, as I said before, there are a lot of individuals being affected in bargaining units. We've affected at least 3 of your bargaining units, if not 4 of your bargaining units this evening. And those individuals don't know this is coming. They know they've been called to a meeting tomorrow morning to talk about it. We will lay it out when that happens, but it would be unfair for us to discuss that in open session with them right now.
Can I get a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt the superintendent's financial and personnel recommendations, which includes the reassignment of administrators, the elimination of 16 positions, the restructuring of 15 positions, and the appointment of Mr. Steven Sargalski as principal of JFK Middle School, all effective July 1st, 2015.
Second.
A motion made by Mr. Grady, seconded by Ms. Thurston. Any discussion? Mr. Neville?
I just have really one clarification, because I think you made it clear to us in our executive session in terms of the reason to move to fill the elementary intermediate slot. It's being done at request, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
The dominoes, if you will, that's maybe a poor metaphor, but the dominoes, if you will, began when our current JFK principal came to us and said, if it's possible with the retirement, could I go there? It was also interesting that the person we're asking you to place at the middle school also came to us and said, with that retirement, do you think that would be a good place for me? And as it turned out, there's a good place for both of them.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Tina?
And you can also confirm that these budget adjustments that we're going to make and vote on tonight do not include the elimination of full-day kindergarten or sports.
That is correct. One of our priorities, as we heard loud and clear from the special meeting, was this was an area that the board would not like to go to unless it was absolutely necessary, and it was an area that several board members commented on the value of, and so we tried to steer clear of that, as that would be an easy way for the board to save money, but it would have a significant impact on the opportunities for our students.
Any other comments? Sensing none, roll call, Kath.
Mrs. Thurston? Mr. Janitis? Oh, he's not here.
Mr. Janitis has left.
Mr.
the building.
Peabody?
Affirmative.
Mrs. Ungary?
Yes.
Mr. Warwer?
Yes.
Mr. Grady?
For?
Mrs. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mr. Neville?
Yes.
Chairman Serrard?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Very good. So everybody understands it's kind of a, when we say there's a budget rollover, that typically means that the school budget has been frozen, which means that we don't spend anything. We don't buy paper, we don't buy pencils, we don't buy, chalk, we don't buy magic markers for the whiteboard. So when somebody says, okay, there's a $119,000 guesstimate that we're rolling over to the following years, this means we just shut everything off and waited to see where the budget is going. And so understand that when they say budget rollover, it means frozen budget, which means that we're doing less and we're doing without for a section of the year. And that has to be very clear when you hear that, because I know some people misinterpret what that means. So
As a surplus?
it's not really a surplus. It's just decide we just shut the spigot off and say, that's it. You guys, we're too close to the threshold and we need to stop. So I just wanted to be very clear about that. Now, also, as I've said in the past, part of the budget process is the reason it's broken is we get so many guesstimates, like when it comes to health insurance and that kind of stuff. And I really, really want to say this emphatically, that our employees that work in the central office stayed on top of this probably a lot longer than most professionals would. So we've got a lot of serious numbers to play with that have softened this blow. But understand, we're cutting it close again, like we did last year. So guys that personnel that need to be given a shout out to because they've deserved it. Deputy Superintendent Chris Drezick, Chief Personnel Officer John Kosher. These guys worked very, very hard to make the cuts or suggestions for the cuts that none of us would have thought of. And it was very creative. And you got to give them a heads up. And they stayed on it, and I give them credit for it because I believe lesser people would have walked away with their hands up, and we probably would have cut sports. Also, you have to give a shout out to Town Manager Mike Koppler, IT Director Paul Russell, and Chief Education Technology Officer Guy Barassa. Those guys work very, very hard. Now, understand also that this budget does have some significant technology cuts, and that's unfortunate. But it is what it is. So, I mean, you have to give those guys credit, and they really do deserve it. So, that's all I'm going to say about that. Receipt and action upon recommendation of superintendent of schools concerning teacher contract non-renewals in accordance with Connecticut General Statute 10-151. Do you motion? I need a motion. Motion made by Tina, seconded by Mr. Peabody. Any discussion?
Are we at liberty to say what that
Yeah,
motion is for?
by all means.
This allows us to call back the 61 teachers that received pink slips a couple months ago.
Any other discussion?
Nobody's happier than us to call back those teachers, okay? And just understand that even all these arrangements in here, and I think the superintendent did a pretty good job of specking out that the impacts, and there's impacts we haven't even thought of these cuts here, and what it's going to do. There's going to be a significant amount of change, and there's things we won't have, and that we're used to having, or we've been able to get. So, I mean, just keep that in mind. And I think we'd all like to go into more detail. I think the superintendent has explained that we have specific reasons why, and out of respect for our bargaining units, we have to bring this back to them. So just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Sensing none. Kathy, roll call.
Mrs. Thurston? Mr. Peabody?
Affirmative.
Mrs. Ungary?
Yes.
Mr. Walwer?
Yes.
Mr. Grady?
For?
Mrs. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mr. Neville?
Yes.
Chairman Serrard?
Yes.
Motion passes.
On to new business. Item 11A, 2015 Lester J. Bodley Memorial Scholarship. Dr. Schuman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this is the board's opportunity to confirm the selections for the Lester Bodley Memorial Scholarships. You have done that since 2004. You've seen the information in your packets. We want to be very careful to safeguard the names because this is going to be a surprise for those individuals when it is announced, but nevertheless it requires board action for you to prove the individuals whose applications you have reviewed. So you may do that by referring to them as Student A and Student B as presented, and that way we can move forward and start to get the awards prepared for them.
Do I have a motion to approve student A and B?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Sensing none, can I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Thurston? Mr. Peabody?
Affirmative.
Mrs. Ungary?
Yes.
Mr. Walwer?
Yes.
Mr. Grady?
For.
Mrs. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mr. Neville?
Yes.
Chairman Sirard?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Item 11B, June 23rd.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. What happened to item 8? You passed it by, you didn't ask.
No, audiences were requested, and there was no one here that had their name on the list.
Didn't bring it up.
Oh, I most certainly did.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Yes, I did. Item 11B, June 23rd, Board of Education meeting. Dr. Schumann.
The June 23rd Board of Education meeting is in conflict with the Fermi High graduation, so the board would need to cancel that meeting if we were going to go to graduation. Huh?
There was a
There
sign
will,
up on
there,
it.
there may be a quorum of the meeting, but,
That's for the second.
so we'd be looking for you to cancel the meeting on the 23rd so that you can attend graduation.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Motion made by Mr. Grady, seconded by Ms. Ungary. Any discussion? Sensing none, roll call.
Okay. Mrs. Thurston? Mr. Peabody?
Affirmative.
Mrs. Ungary?
Yes.
Mr. Walwer?
Yes.
Mr. Grady?
For.
Mrs. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mr. Neville?
Yes.
Chairman Sirard?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Board committee reports. Building committee?
I don't have anything to report at this point.
So good. Curriculum committee?
Curriculum committee, I do. Okay, we had a meeting last Wednesday, right? Basically, two items came up we had representatives coming from the schools and brought two items there. One was a travel abroad opportunity for high school students, and Ms. Burr and Jensen brought us two opportunities that would come up for the summer of 2016, I believe. And it'd be a joint opportunity for both the Fermi and Enfield, and they see it as a unifying thing for the combination of the two schools. One of the things that we've always had issues with travel abroad was that the kids would go out during the school year. They'd have to keep track of their grades, and it would create a lot of angst, I think, for the kids as well as for the teachers to keep them current as they go along here. And so they explored out having a program in the summertime where they could go abroad and get some half a credit because they'll be going through some language schools that'll be over there. So they brought it to us as an opportunity for us to discuss with them and to move forward, and that's what there was a consensus of our group to do that, and it will eventually come back, I believe, to the board for a final approval. But I think the concept made sense to us. A lot of the issues that we've had in the past have to do with that kind of interruption of the school year for these youngsters, and it prohibits some kids because they're playing sports and they can't take advantage of that opportunity. So now it would happen in July, and it would give a greater opportunity to these kids. So that's moving forward and will eventually come back to us. The second thing had to do it was basically a discussion of a concept of class rank and the decile system in the valedictorian and salutatorian. A lot of the things they're bringing to us now are the thinking that's coming out of the staffs as part of the transition process of what we want the new high school to look like, and some changes that they'd like to institute there, and they're looking to want to educate us about what those are, the reasons for it, and ultimately, hopefully, to carry it out. We talked about the scheduling at an earlier meeting that happened, I think, a month or two ago. I think we had that discussion, and they're going to come back to us, I think, in June to talk to us further about it and educate the board on the work that they've been doing. And so these are proposed changes that would change the class rank system to a decile system and change the valedictorian, salutatorian to possibly 2 speakers that would be selected by the student bodies to represent the class at graduation. There's much more detail into it, which I'll let them present to us, but I think the 3 of us liked the discussion that took place. We thought it should continue further, be brought back to the board level, and therefore more to the public level so they understand the reasons for this. And my thinking right now is that if we can make it work, we'd have them come back in June for at least the first step of that process. To do something like that may require us to change policy as well. So, but I think giving the board the background, and then we turn it over to the policy committee to do whatever they had to do if that was the consensus.
You got the chairman right here.
I know, talk to him right.
If I may, yes, thank you. We're looking forward. We did have a policy committee meet earlier today, and Mr. Neville presented some concepts. So we're looking forward to, after a public presentation, to receiving recommendations from the curriculum committee.
Thank you.
Very good.
That's it.
Approval of the minutes, regular board meeting minutes, May 12th, 2015. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Grady, seconded by Ms. Thurston. Any discussion, changes? Sensing none, show of hands. Motion passes.
I abstain.
Mr. Wauer has abstained. Special meeting minutes, May 18th, 2015. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Motion made by Ms. Thurston, seconded by Mr. Peabody. Any discussion or changes? Show of hands.
Abstain.
Mr. Grady has abstained.
I abstained.
Mr. Wauer has abstained.
Anybody else want to abstain?
No, we were there.
Okay.
Approval of accounts and payroll.
No, we don't have anything.
Very good. Correspondence and communications, Secretary Grady.
We do. We are all invited to the Enrico Fermi High School Award Scholarship Program, which will be held June 1st at 6:30 p.m., but a presenter's reception starting at 5:45 to 6:15 in room D206. So you all have it in your packet.
Item 6, well,
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make a comment that last year, Mr. Grady and I were called to the stage to assist, and Mr. Grady did a wonderful job in presenting.
I want to know, did he dance?
That's coming.
His head's getting bigger.
It's coming.
Me and Tom are getting pushed to the side.
item 16, audiences. Do we have any audiences?
Paper got thrown somewhere?
On the table, somebody signed up. You're supposed, Robert's Rules of Order, you're supposed to call it 3 times.
Mr. T-Katz, I'm going to ask you kindly, please do not do an outburst in the meeting.
Oh, I'm gonna,
I'm going to ask you again kindly, please do not do an outburst in the meeting. That's the second time. Tricia Wright, 66 Oldenwood Street.
I'll be after her. Come on.
Oakwood Street, excuse me, sorry, Trish.
It's okay. It's the first time we've seen each other. Just for the record, Mr. T-Katz is being very sweet and trying to make sure that I speak tonight, and I came in at 7:08, and it was during the board comments, and so I signed up after. It was the first time to talk, but I appreciate him trying to make sure that I have my opportunity. I don't know if this is a legitimate thing to ask or not, but I am very confused about what you said about the administrators and who's leaving Fermi and maybe going to Enfield High and all that stuff. So I don't know if Dr. Schumann is allowed to restate that, because it's kind of sounded to me as selfishly as a Fermi parent that Mr. Newton's leaving. But it's just the way that it was, and I know you have to speak in general terms, but I got lost. So I don't know if I'm the only one who got lost, and if so, we can talk afterwards. But in any case, in all seriousness, I came tonight because I couldn't have agreed with Mr. Janitis' statements when I walked in about how cruddy, to say it nicely, that the budget season was. I didn't think that it could be any worse than last year, but I was proven wrong. I think part of the problem, again, is miscommunication between both you guys and the town council and you guys. I can't tell you how many times I was told by a Board of Ed member that the town council said this, and then the town council guy or person would say, well, the Board of Ed person told me that, and the politicking that goes behind there. I don't know how you guys still have stomachs. unless you have a lot of stock in Tums and Mylanta, because I couldn't listen to it as a person, let alone be involved. So I know one of the problems that was consistently talked about was that, just as an example, that the department chair heads don't teach. That's wrong, but that's never been corrected. But it's not believed, or it's not being remembered, because it's still being said to constituents and people that don't have kids in the school system anymore. So they're believing, and rightly so, what they're being told, because they don't know different. And there's other examples, but I think I don't know how you can more effectively communicate with each other. It dumbfounds me that the Democrats all don't get along and the Republicans don't all get along, because you're in the same parties. But it's hard to live in our town. It really is. And I'm nervous that our education is slowly being degraded, and that people aren't caring about that. And that's very scary, because who wants to live in our town? Who wants to be here? I do, and I know the people that are here want to be, and I'm sure a lot of the people that are at home watching this want to be as well. I don't know how to communicate that. I'm going to be going to the town council meeting on Monday and saying it again. I don't know, I've talked about it last fall, I talked about it last spring, and not that I'm the voice of wisdom by any means, but it's a great town to be in. But this process has got to change, and everybody agrees that it has to change. Change it. Stop the politicking. Stop the backstabbing. Stop the negativity. Speak up for our kids. They are our future. Please.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. Item 17A and B have already been discussed. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Hold on.
Oh, Rob, I don't have your name on the list.
You didn't give me a chance. You took the sheet. Let me put my name on the list. You got to run the meeting the proper way.
And I do run the meeting.
No, you do not.
Mr. T-Cats, please do not disrupt the meeting. You are
I'm not
violating
disrupting the
Robert's
meeting.
rules.
No, you're violating.
Mr. T-Cats.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is it working?
The light on?
Yeah, now it is. Okay. Under Robert's Rules of Order, you have to operate the meeting. You're operating under Robert's Rules of Order. If you make a mistake, the people from the audience can call point of order and correct you. You have to call 3 times for an audience. All the other boards and commissions do that. I don't know why you violate the Robert's Rules of Order. Okay, now I'm going to go back. You said 2006 you lost 1,300 or 1,600 students. That was since '98. That was the third peak. That's when the school budget was $45 million. You had a peak in '71 of over 13,000 students, and 1933 was the first peak. But I listened to 2 lectures. One was about the rise of Hitler's empire, and the second was the life of Winston Churchill. Hitler was a war hero. He earned 2 Iron Crosses. Iron Cross is equivalent to the Purple Heart. But he was very dismayed that Germany lost World War I. And through politics, he gained his party's National Socialist Democratic Party, 38% of the election. He became chancellor. First thing he did was put all his executive committee in charge of all the state police departments. They, in turn, put their friends ahead of the local police departments. The other thing he did, he started the Hitler Youth Corps, and he put armed guards in the schools. Just what we're doing. And that's what we took our eye off the ball on the budget, and for 2 years, all we talked about on the town council and the school board is about the armed guards. We forgot about everything else. So I think we should get back to education. Winston Churchill was not very good with politics. And he said a couple things about the War Department, and he had a big problem with the school systems. And he equated the War Department and the superintendent of schools the same way. He said the superintendent of schools has 3 budgets, one to full of parents, one to full of Parliament, and one to full of school board. Thank you. Got to get back to education. You should have done this budget 6 months ago, not today. You should have long-term visions of the budget, where you're going to cut cost, how you're going to change things, but you have done nothing about it to the 11th hour, and that's wrong. You get the parents upset, and you don't show the expenses to the town council. You refuse to show the expenses to the town council so they can make an intelligent decision about education. So you have to give them more information. You failed in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. T. Katz. Ms. Lisa Rogers.
Thank you so much. Lisa Rogers, 8 Winter Way. I'm coming here late this evening due to a celebration of 10 years of our Parent Leadership Academy. I'm very, very proud of the 119 graduates that will have graduated come June 4th. 10 years of over at least 10 to 12 parents in each class. I thank the Board of Education, I thank the superintendent, as well as all of the schools that are involved with our parents. I believe that they've come out of our academy skilled, ready to work, volunteer in our community, in our schools, and on your committees that you hope to have filled with the parents' voice, and that we're giving voice to children and families in Enfield. I'm very, very proud of them, and I'm very proud of the program. Thank you so much.
Elizabeth Davis.
Good evening.
Feeling well.
My name's Elizabeth Davis. I reside at 201 North Maple Street. First off, I want to thank you all for all your hard work. I know it wasn't easy, and thanks for, how they came up to save $2.6 million. It's a great way of what they did because we get to bring back our 62 teachers. My question I have and concern is, I understand the 14 retirements, but the areas they are is math, reading, English, SPED, and stuff like that, and we're going to fill them within. So my main question is, we are filling them with licensed specialty in that area, not just filling them with a teacher, is my big concern. And then, which also comes across, is how do we know as parents who holds what license in all these areas? Within the school, we keep saying everybody is licensed in that specialty, but how do we honestly know as a parent? We can be told anything without actually knowing it. So I'm just wondering, as a parent, how do we know who holds what licenses? I know somehow it's a public knowledge, but I just don't know where we would see it. So I just wanted to bring that across. That's my big concern, is to make sure we're filling it with licensed specialties in those specialty areas. That's the point of them being specialties. So, and then thank you again for all that you guys do. You guys did do a great job, seriously, and I know you all worked very hard and you worked together, which was great to see. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Mary Scott.
Mary Scott, 64 Yale Drive. I just wanted to thank you guys I know this has been a very difficult, incredibly difficult budget season. I am happy to see some of the outside-the-box thinking going on, which I think is really important for us to do to help maintain our teachers and our staff, our classroom sizes, and to look within our school system for leaders, people to step up into different positions. I think the parents, though, are going to want, and at least for me, myself, a little more clarification on exactly, people moving into administrative positions. Last year, when we had a vacancy in the K through 2 at retirement, there was all sorts of meet and greets, people meeting with these new principals, parents being able to talk to them, getting comfortable. And I think that's something that needs to be done once some of these decisions have been fully made, allowing parents to have that ability to have a conversation, at least meet up with whoever these new people that are going to be coming in. Since I know there's at least one retirement in the 3 through 5 schools, And as a parent, I would really like that. So I have another child coming to that school as well as a current child. So those are important things for me as a parent. The other thing that I wanted to say is that, and I totally lost my train of thought. It's been a long evening. Oh, I wanted to talk about what Lisa Rogers spoke about, Parent Leadership Academy, and the support the Board of Ed and the staff of the school system has for the program. I'm a graduate of Class 5. We just finished our dinner tonight of 10 years, and I think it's a great force. I hope you guys continue to support it, and I hope that I look forward to communication from the board from now on with regard to where we're going with respect to administration, things like that in our schools, just so we can have some comfort and we know kind of what the plan of action is and what's going on. But again, thank you for having to make some of these hard decisions. This was not an easy process, I know, for all of you. So I'll go. Thanks. Good night.
Thank you, Mary. Bethany Olet.
Good evening, Bethany Olet, 24 Betty Road. I'd also like to thank you. Budget time is never easy. I don't care what year it is, unless they give you more money than you need. And I would just like to say that the communication, I think, is key. And I think year-long communication, the budget is a living, breathing thing that happens all year and adjusts throughout the year. And, we get to budget time and we talk about what possible cuts are and where our money comes from. And a lot of it, we talk about state mandates and that sort of thing. I know I'd asked our previous meeting if we could get just a little more detail on what those things are and their effect on our budgets, so we can effectively go to our state leaders and help for next year. This doesn't stop today. It doesn't stop, when the new school season starts. It's a continuous thing. And I think our parents and our residents need to understand that and have that information throughout the year so our leaders hear it continuously. If they hear it, they're going to start listening. If we bombard them with our concerns, they're going to have to pick up the phone and listen to it. And those calls multiply. So I just, if we can get that information, we can help the community as a whole and not just depend on our board and our school personnel to make these numbers work for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethany. Anyone else? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.